be okay for the three of us to stand down there. I think that'll be good.
So just listen through that and
Yeah,
make sure I can hear you.
The headphones and make sure you can hear us.
And if I can't?
And if you can't, just get our attention. Say, hey, you're static, or
okay.
I can't hear you, and then we'll try to troubleshoot.
Okay.
So.
I feel like I'll be
Go ahead. You go till you get cold enough. It's going to be kind of windy up here, but I think it'll work. And we should be able to receive questions through. Sorry, we tested the sound on our end and it sounded okay at least.
Check 1 2 1 2.
So, we should be able to get.
Check 1 2 1 2.
We should be able to get chat group.
It's actually clearing up a little bit.
Yeah, maneuver it up.
Am I gonna get it tangled?
Actually, what I would do, you want to hold this for a moment? I'd say let's actually show the...
That's what we usually are.
Let's go back.
Right. Oh, this is good. This cord, this is long. This is good. This is a long cord.
Yeah, this is all we got.
All right, let me check and make sure that we're live here.
Well, the webcam appears to be looking at us.
All right, let me check and make sure that we're live here.
Well, the webcam appears to be looking at us.
Oh man, fingers are gonna get cold.
I hope they put this on the lower river feed so they can watch the Dumpling cam and this cam. Oh man.
Oh man.
I don't think you switched this over yet. Fingers are... Maybe he doesn't like numb fingers. So we're going to talk about our misadventures today?
Sure.
Yeah.
It appears our camera woman is taking full advantage of her power.
Do you want me to hold that?
Oh, maybe my... Seems like I'm not online anymore. I'm not sure why.
Check the connections, I guess, huh? It's up to you, Aaron, you and I.
What are we
prompts?
going to talk about?
Lights flashing on all those.
A phenomenon known as Cloud Niagara.
Well, we're going to take an Odyssean voyage.
I think we did. If Dante had seen Dumpling Mountain, he really would have had something to write about.
You know what that is? What that thing is?
The plant?
Solana?
Did.
You know what that is? What that thing is?
The plant?
Solana?
Light sensor or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
That?
Yeah.
That's Mike when he's not.
Okay, it looks like roll in. So let me.
Is the camera live?
Yeah, we should be live. Let me double check, just to make sure. Yeah, so
It's
we're
probably
there.
gonna be a little better place to.
We are live, so everyone can. I think everyone can hear us. So, let me jump down there and. Stand in the middle so you guys can also read the questions too. Aaron, if he says hello. Hello.
Yep.
All right, excellent. All right. Well, we are coming to you live from the ice planet Hoth. But no, we're coming to you live my National Park and Preserve. To my left is Landis Ealer. To my right is Aaron Kameyer. They're also rangers who work at Brooks Camp with me during the summertime. And we're happy to be talking to you up on top of Dump today. We're kind of skeptical whether or not we'd be able to accomplish this task and bring our equipment up here and do the other things that we need to do and get the chat going at the same time. But it seems like things are working out pretty successfully so far today. We're also really fortunate, of course, that we have the partnership with Explore.org, and that makes this whole phenomenon really a possibility. Because otherwise, we'd never be able to come up on top of Dumpling Mountain like this and be able to broadcast out to the world. So this we're really fortunate that we have this partnership. If you are watching the broadcast right now on Explore.org, please submit your questions if you have any for us in the comment stream down at the bottom of the page. You can just scroll down below the icons for the other cameras and you can submit your questions there. If you're following along at a different website and you're on Twitter at the same time, use the hashtag BearCam to ask questions, and we'll do our best to try to answer as many questions as we can. We don't often get up here and get to talk to the public about what it's like on Dumpling Mountain and the landscape here in Katmai. I think the three of us were sort of hoping some views of something besides fog, but that's not the case. Maybe one of the things that we had maybe discussed that we could come up here and talk about is kind of just a little bit of how right now this is a time of the year where a lot of things are migrating. The things off the top of our head that we can think of that people are really interested in knowing about is just, what about the bears? Are the bears moving up to this area? And we didn't see any bears today, did we?
Nope.
No.
No bears.
No, not so far at
No.
least.
But so when we don't have any bears within our lines of sight, but we know bears use Dumpling Mountain at certain times of the year, and maybe that's something that people would want to know a little bit more about. If you guys could maybe walk us through sort of like the seasonality of bear activity up on Dumpling Mountain, because it's going to pick up now, but it kind of is dead in the middle of the summer, and something different is happening in the springtime too.
Where do we want to start?
Well, I don't know. We could start right now, I guess. Yeah, this time of the year.
So this time of the year, bears are coming up here to start denning activity. We said we didn't see any today, but bears will start to leave the rivers and streams that have been full of salmon for the last couple of months at this point. And they'll start moving up here, and we call it denning activity. Bears don't come up right away and dig a den and go to sleep. They may spend a couple days, maybe a week or so, would you say, Mike?
Yeah. From what I've read, it seems like it can be almost a week.
Yeah. So they may dig a den, but they may stay outside that den, and they may still be active, less active than they are earlier in the summer, but they'll linger around that area. If they're disturbed, they may move into a new den. But as the next couple weeks come along here, they'll enter the den and they'll stay there for the rest of the winter.
And then we have a lot of activity, you know, up here during certain times of the years with certain animals. Not up here during certain times of the years with certain animals. Not, of course, in the wintertime the bears are just sleeping in their dens, but there could be other animals up here throughout the wintertime. And I don't know, when we were hiking and we were carrying the fuel cells down here, or the fuel.
They're mostly white, the ones I saw. You know, they're changing kind of their plumage for the winter season. Yeah, definitely taking advantage of some of the resources that they have up here.
And the bears do that too. I mean, they come up here when there's period of time before they go to lower elevations where they might be able to find some more reliable food resources. So definitely there's a seasonality to bear activity up on Dumpling Mountain, and that not only happens with bears, but the ptarmigan too. They have maybe small scale migrations. If the weather's really fierce up here and everything's covered in snow, there's not any food for the ptarmigan to eat, so they're probably going to migrate down to lower elevations. And we can find a lot of our songbirds have kind of flown the coop, so to speak.
Yeah.
When we were hiking up Dumpling today, I think we saw some pine grosbeaks.
Yep.
Did we see any other songbirds? I
didn't.
don't know. You know, we weren't necessarily going up and birding, but yeah, we saw a big flock of ravens.
Yeah, the ravens.
But we didn't see anything else. So definitely a seasonality to what happens up here on Dumpling Mountain. And if you're wondering, I think a lot of people are at home maybe wondering what's wintertime like in king salmon and in Katmai. This is kind of it. It's cold and it's dry. The wind today is out of the north. I don't know what you guys estimate the wind speed at.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. 15, 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And then it's yeah, I think it's strong enough that we feel it. Coming up on the ridge line over here, we ended up, you know, I noticed a few gusts were knocking off balance just a little bit, and then also the wind chill. We imagine it's not too far below freezing, but with the wind chill, it's definitely in the teens, and we notice it for sure. We notice it for sure.
Yeah.
Mike, you were mentioning a little bit, you know, talking about you know, seasonality, you know, animals following food resources. And it's something for me, you know, a lot of times I'll come up Dumpling Mountain when we get in kind of late summer, because believe it or not, underneath a lot of the snow we're seeing out here, there's still berries right now that are kind of frozen on the plants. We're seeing stuff like crowberries, blueberries, probably some lingonberries a little lower down. So I was pretty amazed to come up here in this winter landscape, and there's still food to be found. You know, some of these animals are probably taking advantage of.
And that's something at the height of the berry season in late August and September that bears will use. They'll come up to this area and they'll feed on those berries. And down in Brooks Camp, we'll see bear scout full of berries. So it is an important part of their diet. Not as important as salmon in this area, but still important to them in their survival.
We're up on Dumpling Mountain, and when you're watching the Dumpling Cam too, there's, I think, a really good opportunity to look at the larger Katmai landscape. The clouds have lifted just enough that we can actually see a little bit of the lake. I was not expecting this because we were up in the fog for the last several hours, and we had a bit of a misadventure trying to find our way back down to the repeater here. We had to go to another place to grab some fuel jugs and bring them back over here and haul them down. And as anyone on the trip today can attest, it's sometimes difficult to find your way in the fog, but we ended up making it back. But we can see a little bit of the Katmai landscape right now. We can see these lakes. The Brooks River is about 2 miles, 3 miles straight line distance from where we are standing right now. So, when you're watching the Dumpling Cam, I think it certainly is worth mentioning and trying to bring to light the different migration corridors that you can see on the Dumpling Cam itself. The salmon, they are done migrating, they're spawning, but the lakes that you're seeing, the creeks that you can see on this camera, certainly you can see the salmon migrating. And then also the waterways serve as travel corridors for people as well, too.
Yeah, definitely. When we look down at something like Brooks Camp from above, where we kind of see that river down there, you know, people come, they want to see the bears around the Brooks River. A lot of people don't realize, you know, that camp is built on a native village. You know, we have human history going back about 4,500 years here. So there's people who are taking advantage of these same resources, the food, probably salmon, the animals, when some of the great pyramids were being built in Egypt. You know, this was an occupied place. So I imagine this was a view shared by people for many, many different generations we're kind of looking out on, which kind of makes me feel good when I'm collecting my blueberries. I think that, you know, how many people have been doing that before me coming in.
Maybe one other very interesting aspect, Aaron, that we can see very easily from Dumpling Mountain is the glacial history as well. When you're looking across maybe the iliac arm of Naknek Lake, which is kind of still hidden in the clouds, it's pretty easy to see that glacial history, isn't it?
It is. It's not so evident from this area, but in other areas you can see that classic U shape that forms when a glacier has carved through an area. And essentially, this entire area is this one big basin that was carved out by glaciers at the end of the last ice age. And that's very important to the history of the people who lived here. It's very important to the history of the people who live here today. It's very important to all of those resources that Landis was talking about as well. This would not be the place that it is without the glaciers and the work that they've done on this landscape.
I like to consider the glaciers to be pretty much sort of like the sculptors of the landscape itself. If volcanoes are maybe the architects of much of our landscape, I think the glaciers are the sculptors for sure. And it's very easy to see that on the landscape once you start to read the signs. Looking at the color of Naknek Lake, for instance, that's something that all of us, I think, marvel at every time we go down to the beach. Naknek Lake has that almost aquamarine color because of the glacial flower that happens to be in it. So when you are looking at the lakes itself, they are the products of glaciers that help to, of course, influence the travel routes of people. It influences, of course, the way salmon can migrate. Everything is connected to one another here in Katmai, and certainly how all these animals are using the land is dependent on the landforms themselves. So next time you're just watching the dumpling cam and you're enjoying the scenery, I encourage everyone to think about these different connections across the landscape. How do the glaciers connect to the wildlife that happens to be here? How do the bears migrate seasonally up across these mountains? And how are all of these things maybe connected to the lifeways that people have used for thousands of years in this area too?
Yeah, looks like people are probably getting a good view here. We got some of the landscape's going to open up a little bit. So we're kind of looking over, you know, Lake Naknek, probably Lagorce Ridge. We're kind of looking at the north arm of kind of Naknek Lake here. Some of those islands coming out as well.
You can almost even see a little bit difference in color between the two of them. The north arm on the left and the iliac arm on the right.
So yeah, it's starting to get nice, hopefully. We, of course, are going to maybe try to, for the rest of the chat, get to everyone's questions. Glennis, you still okay with the mic? All right. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible during the rest of the chat. We got about 40 more minutes that we'll try to stick with you. Hopefully we don't get too cold and our faces don't start to get too cold, because it's hard to articulate things when your cheeks start to get numb. But I think we'll be able to persevere through it for just a little bit. But of course, some of the first few questions that we have up in our queue happens to be about bears, of course. You know, the bear cams that are so popular because of the bears themselves. So a lot of people are asking, when does the actual hibernation period for these bears start? If we can kind of approximate maybe for certain bears, when would you expect, let's say, an adult female to go in a den versus an adult male?
About now.
About now.
It can depend. It's a little bit different from bear to bear. Bears are highly personalized animals, but generally pregnant females will go in first, and a couple of our larger females we haven't seen for a while now. So that doesn't mean that they're going to come back with cubs next year, but it does suggest maybe that they have gone off and started their hibernation period or activity. And after that, we'll have family groups go in. So we'll have the sows and cubs go in, and it seems like the most typical type of bear we're seeing around the river right now are family groups. So it doesn't appear that we've reached that stage of denning activity yet.
And then the last class of bears to go into their dens are adult males, and they may not enter the den until the middle of November here, sometimes even December, depending on the amount of food that's available. And it's really important for everyone to think when the bears are going into hibernation, they're doing it not to avoid cold, they're doing it to avoid famine. They gain a bigger advantage by going into the den and hibernating and saving energy on Dumpling Mountain. So we didn't see any bears, but we saw a moose, which was much more rare than I think seeing a bear up on Dumpling Mountain. So the bears are going to be going into their dens at this time of the year. But people are sometimes wondering a little bit about the nuances associated with bear denning, and I don't know if we can really answer this. I don't know if you guys have read anything associated with this, or because I've never seen a bear dig a den. I've never seen a mother with cubs, up here digging it. But people are wondering, do the cubs help with the digging of the den, and will they, initiate mom, or will they imitate mom and dig their own holes? And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Whenever bears den any place that I've worked, they always just disappear, so I'm not able to observe that directly. There's one thing I know that I saw yesterday, with you, Mike, as we're kind of closing down camp, we watched, a mother bear and cub, and the mother bear was digging, in the trail, probably trying to get some of the ash, something that she's looking for nutrient-wise. And when the mother was digging, the cub was digging next to her. And I could tell the cub didn't know what it was doing. It was just kind of digging, I think, to imitate what mom was doing. Well, maybe we can make an assumption that would happen with the denning. I'm not sure. It's kind of that learning behavior, through experiencing.
I would imagine if they do dig a hole, it's not going to be big enough for them to go into. A lot of the behavior you see out of cubs, especially this time of year, tends to be exploratory or investigative, and they do a lot of things, like you said, Landis, imitating their mother, but it's more practice. They're not fully engaged in those activities, it seems like to me.
Yeah, they're kind of, they often see mom do something and they're like, well, maybe I should try that. Mom is sniffing at something, maybe I should go and try that. Mom is standing up, I'm going to stand up too and look around. You watch the behavior of the cubs. Cubs are relaxed when mom is relaxed. Cubs are stressed out when mom is stressed out. So it may, there may be parallels to that when the denning period begins. I'm sure they're doing a lot of learning by watching mom, but just how much of a role they play in digging the den, I don't think we can really say for sure.
And a bear can move a lot of dirt pretty quickly. So it probably doesn't take that long for an adult bear to dig a den.
And people are wondering, do we know the locations of bear dens? Do all the bears den in the same place every year?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. We were kind of talking a little bit about that when we were walking up the mountainside here, because there's some places, on this mountain where we know bears den, at least in the past. Bears, from what I understand here in Katmai, probably do not come back and reuse their dens. I'll come with that. I don't know if there's any disagreement with that. Probably a little lower elevation, though, we're probably seeing dens being basically excavated here. And I don't think we can really show anything on the camera here. From what I understand, they usually like an elevation of about 1,300 feet, give or take, above sea level. Camp is a little less than 100 feet above sea level. And I'm not sure exactly where we are exactly up here. Are we about 2,400? I'm not sure.
The summit of Dumpling is 2,440.
Okay.
So we're probably about 2,200 here,
Yeah.
I'd say. It's quite a world of difference from down there, where it's probably somewhat comfortable today compared to
where we are right now with this.
It feels more comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, once we get down below and it's a calm wind and 35 degrees, we'll be walking around in t-shirts after standing up here in the cold all day. So yeah, I think the bears, they seem, from what I've read, they seem to have a fidelity perhaps to certain denning areas. but they don't use the same dens here. Unfortunately, we can't see some of the slopes from our position where bear dens can be found on a consistent basis. I was hoping that the cloud ceiling would be higher today so we could sort of ceiling would be higher today so we could sort of ceiling other slopes and try to look for any signs of recent the fog and the low clouds today just didn't allow us to actually do that.
Possibilities. I think probably most people who are probably on, removing a snare, and that happened down at the mouth of Dumpling Creek, coming out this mountain. And if you get up towards where that creek starts on the hillsides here, that's one of the places, I hear about finding, bear dens. So that's not something we can show you, but that might be something to be able to connect with, kind of through the story with that bear, these locations.
And that would be on the opposite side of the mountain from where we are right now.
Yeah, we almost wound up there on our little bit of a misadventure coming back to where we needed to be, but yeah. Luckily we corrected someone's error. I'm not going to mention who, but but someone's error. Anyway, kind of a part of that question that leads into the next one is, did the bears den in the same place every year? They may, go to the same slopes, but as far as we know here in Katmai, they're not using the same dens. The dens that I've seen, they tend to be just excavated straight into the hillside. They tend to just be excavated right into the earth itself, and they probably collapse in the springtime over as the soil happens to thaw. So we don't know if bears are using or reusing the same dens here. We don't think so. It'd be interesting to find out. The bears here, though, aren't known to use tree cavities or rock crevices. Black bears in the Smokies and in many other places in the United States, they'll use tree cavities or hollowed out trees, maybe even climb up into the top of a snag in a tree and climb down into the rotten out core to den in. But there's no trees here in Katmai that are big enough even maybe for a yearling, I guess. Yeah. So we don't think that the bears are using the same dens. And what would a bear do if kind of a follow-up question, if it returned to, let's say, its den and another bear has already occupied it? It probably would be somewhat like any other territorial dispute over a resource that bear happens to want.
The bigger bear would win.
Yeah, the bigger bear would get the prize.
Yeah.
That's what I can imagine, but I don't know if that really plays out around here or not, since they happen to dig new dens each and every year.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, like in camp, you might see, activity on the webcams. Bears are digging belly holes, their day beds, and some bears will go back to the same ones, day after day. And sometimes when they come back, there's a different bear in it. And I rarely see it evoke any sort of conflict. The bear is like, okay, my hole seems to be filled, moves on to another one. So I imagine it might be the same up here.
Yeah, there's a lot of space. There's not much, I don't think there'd be much of a reason for a bear to den right next to another one. And I haven't read anything that would suggest that bears compete really vigorously for denning spots. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be a lack of denning habitat across Katmai's landscape.
And another thing to follow up on that is that we see a high concentration of bears down in areas like the Brooks River where there are food resources like salmon, but once they leave those areas, they tend to disperse. So we're probably not going to have very many situations where bears are going to be running into each other outside of Brooks Camp.
Kind of some other questions. We're getting more questions about denning. Let's see. Do the dens in this area face a certain direction? Some areas of the country that they tend to be on certain, like the north side of a mountain or the south side of the mountain. What about here in Katmai? Do you guys remember?
I've heard that they favor north sides, if I remember correctly.
I've seen them. It's been curious to me because I've read that they that some dens will be found on these different aspects, maybe the north side of the mountain, but I've seen them on other slopes as well. In fact, the one that I know about over here that is the closest spot where I found bear dens is a southern facing exposure mostly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think in Yellowstone it might be, they know that they go to places where there's a lot of cover and a lot of snowfall.
Yeah.
The Yellowstone population of grizzlies is much more heavily studied than what we have here in Katmai, partly because there's less of them and we want to protect them and make sure that we know enough about them to ensure their survival. You never came across a bear den in Yellowstone, did you?
I have not been that
Okay.
lucky enough yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm seeing, or what I've seen here is bear dens on different aspects. The video that's on Katmai's Flickr page of me crawling into the den, that's on the north side of Dumpling Mountain. The dens that are over here behind the camera, those tend to be, that's a south-facing exposure. So I don't know. It seems like here in Katmai, maybe you have the right elevation and the right amount of snow cover is more
Yeah.
important than whether or not you're on a north slope or a south slope.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. A few more questions popped into our queue. And let's see here. This is an interesting question. How did Dumpling Mountain get its name?
I don't know offhand. Do you know? Do you know, Mike?
I do not know
So
that.
the story
okay.
story I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not.
Here comes the Ranger lore.
Yeah. Is that it was named after somebody's wife, and it was her nickname, and the nickname became a mountain.
All right.
That's what I've heard.
All right.
We don't know a lot of the words out here, a lot of the place names. Even Katmai itself, we don't know what those terms mean. So you have to be kind of careful when you hear about how a certain thing got its name, because a lot of that tends to be legend, and it's hard to separate the fact from the fiction. But that's the story I've heard.
All right. All right. I didn't know that. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting to me. I think
Yeah.
we have a little bit more research to do. So
Yeah.
whoever submitted that question today has certainly stumped us.
Yeah.
We'll have to look that up for sure. But you know, kind of a follow-up to that question is people are wondering a little bit about the hike up here. How long is it, for example, up to the top?
Yeah, definitely. You know, where we are coming up here, this is probably 3.5 miles. You know, it's about 4 miles one way all the way up to the top. As Mike mentioned, it's about 2,400 feet, and a lot of it's pretty steep. You know, we started off, you know, as we're coming out from camp, I mean, it's that forested spruce forest you're seeing kind of from the webcams. You're going to get some places where it can be very muddy. It's going to be pretty steep coming up. About what, a mile and a half in, there's some great overlooks. That's where most people come as visitors. You know, come out and you have a, yeah.
And the hiking, I think, gets easier once you break out of that tree line. Our tree line here is somewhat suppressed compared to other areas in North America, especially in Colorado, in the 10,000 feet or so,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm used to.
New England, it's 4,000-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Depends on the mountain, I guess.
Yeah.
And
yeah. We don't have very many mountains bigger than 4,000.
okay.
That sounds about right.
But yeah, here in Katmai, our timber line probably is, you know, in some places it can be as low as 1,300 feet or so. So where we are, we're in we're maybe almost 1,000 feet above tree line, and that is reflected by the vegetation that we're seeing growing all around us. When I'm hiking up Dumpling Mountain, I really marvel at the transitions between the forest down below and the meadows that I happen to reach around timberline, and then getting up into this tundra here. The tundra, I think, is an amazing landscape. You don't have a huge diversity in plants up here on the tundra, but what we do have is a really high abundance in certain individuals. So you just need to get to know a few different types of lichen, a few different types of shrubs that are dwarfed and growing on the ground here, and you can get a really good understanding of the ecology of the landscape, so to speak. Crowberries are really abundant up here. That's a plant that we often like to snack on as we're walking up here. We were still snacking on a few of those, even though they're frozen. So it's just like having a frozen berry smoothie, I guess.
Food.
Yep, pre-frozen food. Blueberries are still really abundant up here at this time of the year. This year was a really good year for blueberries. So the tundra landscape, is defined essentially by a lack of trees.
Yeah.
There are, of course, other habitats across the earth that are treeless as well too, but we have tundra in Alaska because it's generally too cold and too dry and suppresses tree growth. In the middle of the summertime up here, you can come up and find that the soil is really, really dry. So it's a really hard growing place for vegetation to grow, not only in the wintertime but also in the summer as well too.
Even after really heavy rain, it's amazing how quickly the tundra will dry out.
I'm gonna go give him a hand.
So one other thing that you were talking about, it does change, or a lot. One of the things people were talking about on the webcams this week were how quickly things changed here, and how it went from fall to essentially winter in the span of a couple days. And that's another great thing about the Dumpling Trail. If you come out here during the season, you can hike sometimes in the year. When you first get here, then a couple days later, and you may already have seen a transition because a lot of the plants and flowers out here really have a couple days, maybe a week or two, where they're blooming, and then they're gone, and then another group of plants. And the Dumpling Trail has such a great series of micro habitats. It's a really great way to see a lot of diversity until you get up here.
And some of us, some of the employees, we like to sort of escape the controlled chaos of Brooks Camp. Come up here where maybe we can sit down and relax and not have to worry about a bear necessarily coming and sniffing at our ear if we're not paying attention to certain things. So I like to come up here and just sort of sit down and enjoy the quiet, not only the scenery, not only the tundra vegetation, but just sort of take a moment to relax and reflect upon really where I am. We can't see any volcanoes right now, unfortunately. We're just too many clouds in the way, but people are wondering, because we can see volcanoes on the Dumpling Cam on clear days. Last week, I think, we were getting some really great views of Mount Martin.
Yeah.
Other volcanoes that can be seen from up here, Mount Griggs, Mount McGeek as well, too, I think can be seen. But people are wondering, what about ashfall at Brooks Camp? Have we ever had an eruption that dumped ash in the Brooks Camp area?
Yeah, definitely. Last one I know of, 1912, huge eruption had effects here. This is Novarupta. This is what created this national monument originally. But we got almost a foot of ash, in that summer. And when I say we, there was no park service here yet. This wasn't even a park unit yet. Do you know, did anything happen when Trident, 1954?
I don't think that any ash reached here.
Okay.
I think it was such a small eruption, it kind of all went west and south.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything more recent than that.
I don't know. I don't think so.
There were a couple of days last year when Pavlov was erupting where we had some really hazy days, but I don't know if it was from Pavlov or if that was valley ash, because on days when there are really strong winds, you'll get big ash clouds that will blow off of the floor of the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. And I've seen that before. This was very significant, where you could see less than a quarter mile at some point. So I don't know if that was, we'd have to check, but.
That's a good point too. We're still getting ash from the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. That's something that you can feel it in your eyes almost on those days when there's a lot of ash blowing through the air. You can kind of feel it on your teeth too, and you're chewing your food. Sometimes things are a little gritty.
The archaeological work that's been done out here has found that there have been several major volcanic eruptions that have dumped ashfall on this area. And I don't know how many there are off the top of my head, but it's at least 4 or 5. Does that sound?
I think Dumont describes
10,
it.
right?
Yeah,
Is it
something
10?
like
Okay,
that.
I was off a little.
Because he has like A through G or something, or H or
I
something.
forget what it is.
So
exactly.
it's quite a lot.
We talked a little bit about the glaciers, but the volcanoes are also a very important story, or part of the story of this landscape and the people who have lived in this area.
I think, for the visitors who do come into camp, one of the first things that's going to greet you upon your arrival when you step off your float plane is you're going to be seeing, bits of volcanic rock on the beach. We are blessed with lots of pumice, a rock that is very light in weight for its size, usually floats. So after, large storms, I'll see little rafts of, these pumice rocks will kind of form and make their way across the lake, kind of wash up near us. Another reminder of some of these things that's happened in our past.
Something to watch for on the lower river cams after strong winds, because you'll sometimes see rafts of pumice floating in the river.
Yeah.
We got a couple of bear questions in our queue, but before we get to those, another question about Dumpling Mountain. This one's going to be hard to answer as well too, because we don't have a weather station up here. But people are wondering, how many feet of snow do you think, or do you estimate, is Dumpling gets over the course of the winter? How many inches on the valley floor, for example?
I don't know for Dumpling.
Yeah, the snow, there's a lot of snow up here compared to the Brooks River. When we go down to get to Brooks Camp in the springtime, there's usually no snow down there. And then up here you can still see it accumulating. And partly that's because it's colder up here most often. But
Yeah.
Hard to know, because like today, there are usually strong winds here during the winter, and that's going to blow snow around. So sometimes you'll run into these pretty deep snow drifts. I don't know how to answer that question.
I do know that there's a very significant precipitation gradient that is directly connected to the elevation. The higher you go in elevation in the park, the wetter it's going to be overall. And in fact, on the big volcanoes that we have behind us, those may receive over 100 inches of precipitation a year, and a lot of that, if not all of it, in some years can be snow. So, that helps to explain why there's so many glaciers on the volcanoes here. When Brooks Camp, that we may receive 20-some inches of precipitation over the course of the year, which isn't a whole lot. King salmon receives even less too, to the west. So the further west you go in the Katmai region, the drier it gets. In the lower in elevation, the drier it gets too. So Dumpling Mountain certainly gets a lot more precipitation than down below, but I don't think we have an exact number. It's a significant amount more, I would imagine, overall. There was a part of that question as well too, or we were talking about a lot of snow. We talked about the glaciers on the mountains, and that's partly why we have glaciers, is because of so much snow. Do we know, however, how many glaciers are in the park off the top of our heads? I don't know if I can remember an exact number.
I want to say it's 5% of the park area is glaciated, but I don't know the number of individual glaciers.
And very few of them are named too.
Yeah.
You go to other parks like Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier has, I don't know how many glaciers going around it. There's like maybe 24 of them or something like that. We have a lot more than that, but most of them aren't named. We have just a few off the top of my head that I can think that are named.
Yeah.
But there's two main sort of ice fields. There's kind of the one around the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, and then there's one in Snowy Mountain, that sort of complex. Then a bit further north too.
And why aren't they named?
They're not named because no one bothered to name them, I guess.
Well,
but there's another reason, yeah.
Did you want to?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So most of this park is wilderness, and the U.S. Geological Service has decided that they will not name geological features in designated wilderness anymore. So a lot of the features in the park, not only the glaciers but the mountains as well, don't have names. And as long as the USGS continues that practice, they won't. And that's a reflection of the wilderness values of this park.
And I think it's important to consider when you're going to a wild place like this, that you're going into a place that it doesn't have the lack of names. When you're looking at a map, it is like the blank spot on the map. With it, Aldo Leopold said something like, he wouldn't want to be a child without, or what avail does 40 freedoms without a blank spot on the map, I think was his actual quote. And he was glad that he was a young man to have wildlands to be sort of young and free in. And Katmai is still protecting that even today, even, almost 80 years after Leopold's death. So Yeah, we have Dumpling Mountain here, but in another place in the lower 48 where there's a lot more people, Dumpling Mountain might have several names because there's kind of two different humps up here. But we definitely don't have that up on the top of the mountain. A few other bear questions in our queue. We're sort of maybe transitioning back to bears. And people are, again, they're kind of wondering about this time of the year. They're wondering about how the bears are interacting with one another and whether or not appetite affects their temperament. Are they more likely to fight over a fishing spot if there's less food, for example? And maybe we can talk about that compared to, I'd say July, comparing July versus September, because I think everyone's going to see a big difference on the cams.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think people probably are seeing difference on the cams because probably both times a year, you're talking about July, and you're talking about, September, October. People are just watching probably different cams mostly. Because, we see that in July, concentrations of food source. The bears are jostling for position. You're seeing the dominance interactions, bigger bears pushing smaller bears around because the food they're going for is all in one place. And I think it's a little different this time of year. I think people are probably seeing that, bears are spread out much further along the river. They're taking advantage of that. There's more room for everyone. I've heard some, I guess, bear arguments on the river over the last few days, but nothing quite as stressful as what I see in July. I don't know if you guys would agree with that.
Yeah.
Coming through.
Yeah, I think part of it is food availability. Part of it is that we talked earlier, bears only tend to be around each other in large numbers for certain times of the year. And in the spring, or in June and July, when the salmon start to arrive, the bears have to get used to being around each other again. And there's a lot more tension at that time of year. I think this time of year they've worked out where each bear sits in the hierarchy. They know their place, and they're more used to being around each other. So it's a less stressful experience for them this time of the year.
I think some of the seeming arguments that I've seen over the last few days has been amongst some of the family groups. And I think I've seen some people kind of chatting about that, in some of the comments feeds, where it just kind of seems like because of the cubs, in these family groups, getting a little too close to each other, moms kind of putting on the boundaries, kind of with their cubs out there. That's been kind of exciting to see. And I don't know, Mike, have you ever observed that come to blows? I always see kind of the posturing, kind of boundaries put up, and then the families kind of separate. Mom will lead the cubs away.
I don't think I've seen a mother or two mothers fight because their cubs were, they wanted to get together and play, for example.
Yeah.
It does depend on the individual bear, though. We have video, and I think this was from 2007, so it's of Holly in Backpack. So Backpack
Okay.
was a yearling. This was after his leg was healed, so he was just kind of walking around. He came across 410. 410 had 2 spring cubs that year, and it looked like he wanted to play with 410's cubs. 410 is sleeping right on the edge of the river, just like 410 does. And the cubs want to play, Backpack wants to play. Holly doesn't want Backpack to play, however. And then you see 410, she doesn't even look, she maybe looks up and says, okay, kids, just go back to doing whatever you're doing. So I've never seen it come to blows, but it does seem like definitely individual mothers can be more defensive than others depending on the situation. So again, another example of just how individual these bears really happen to be. A lot of people are wondering if we have noticed any bears that don't really look fat enough to hibernate yet, or any that have been struggling to gain weight. It seems like a lot of the bears that we're seeing right now, they look pretty pudgy.
Yeah.
I can't really think of any individuals off the top of my head that looked like it was really struggling to gain weight.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, other places I've worked, the bears in Katmai are just bigger than anything I saw in lower 48 personal experience. So even small bears here are just large compared to other environments because of that food. So yeah, I don't think there's anyone I've seen I felt like they're at risk.
Even a bear like 451 who has a significant limp, we were looking at pictures of her compared to last year, and she is bigger this year than she was last year, and she survived last year. So I can't think of any bears off the top of my head that I will look at and go, oh, that looks like a bear that is food insecure.
And there's a lot of food in the river too. Even a bear with a pretty significant injury right now wouldn't really have that much of a hard time finding food. Looking at the bottom of the river, I think we talked about this during the last chat too, just pieces of dead salmon everywhere. And a lot of the bears aren't really looking, it doesn't seem like they're even looking for the whole fish anymore. There's a couple that sit right near the floating bridge, and it's just like they're eating the most rancid fish they can find. I've watched them, Aaron and I have watched them through our binoculars, and we can't really figure out what it's eating. But it looks like it's just picking up heads, fish heads, and trying to get every last piece of soft tissue off of it. I don't know. So those are really well-fed bears. We had a really strong run of salmon this year. In other years, maybe there would be more bears struggling to find food, but of course we can't say for sure. Otis won the Fat Bear Tuesday contest, but who knows? Maybe he won't come back next year. He's an older bear. There could be something else that happens in the meantime that affects his survival. We just don't know for sure. But when you see a really, really big bear, I think we can all assume that looks like a healthy bear, but there could be some other circumstances that could affect its survival rate overall too. And we know so much about these bears when they're in the river. We know next to nothing about what they're doing when they're away from the river. Let's see. One thing that we forgot to do. We're getting. It's about 2:50 right now, so about 10 more minutes in the chat. Bob, you doing okay? You're not shivering too much? Okay, all right. There were a couple people that hiked up the mountain with us to help today, and we're very thankful for their assistance. But I should reintroduce everybody. So to my left is...
Hi, my name is Landis Ealer. I'm one of the seasonal park rangers here in Katmai. And it sounds like I'll be heading to Yellowstone again for this winter.
You're visiting Old Faithful?
Yeah, definitely. Stop by Old Faithful, say hello.
And I'm Mike Fitz again. I'm the media ranger here at Katmai National Park and Preserve. And to my right?
I'm Aaron Kammeyer. I'm also a seasonal ranger here at Katmai.
These two guys are kind of, I have two right-hand men, I'd like to say. They helped me out a ton this summer, and I'm very thankful for their assistance and making Brooks Camp work, making the bear camps work. I know a lot of people have been chatting with Landis and Aaron during the past couple weeks on the bear cam as well too. So we hope that both of them come back next summer, and if they do, they'll probably be spending a bit more time with everybody on the bear cam. So I wanted to reintroduce ourselves in case people happen to join late and are wondering just who the heck these people are that are talking on the frozen planet Hoth for the time being. So. We do not have any tauntauns though to help Sherpa us down the mountain.
No.
So, and we are not hallucinating yet and seeing visions that are telling us to go to the Dagobah system. A few more questions in our queue. We'll try to answer a few more before we call it a day. People are wondering about the individuality, of course, of bears all the time. They're trying to tease out the differences between this female and that female, or this cub and that cub. And this question is, do sows show any favoritism towards male cubs, or any one cub over another?
I haven't seen any. It seems like it's more like up to the cub to be able to... The females, especially earlier in the year, don't tend to share their fish. If a cub wants to get a part of the fish that its mother catches, it has to make the effort to go over there and more or less wrestle it away from her.
Yeah, I have not seen any examples where it seems like a mother is favoring one cub over another. It does seem to be like it's up to the cub to go get food, and if that cub's disposition is maybe a bit more reserved and it doesn't want to swim into the middle of the river and get food, then it's probably not getting food that's in those circumstances. I don't know if you've observed anything either.
Yeah, kind of building off what that is. I mean, it is up to the cubs. What I've observed, seeing like last summer, sometimes you see a family group where one cub is significantly smaller than the others. It just happens to be maybe the runt of the litter, and maybe that difference in size continues throughout the year, because you can almost tell that the bigger cubs are able to compete for that food, which they're faster on it. They're getting more of it from the mom, And that doesn't mean that the smallest cub isn't getting food. It's just growing slower relative to, I guess, the siblings. I don't think that's a choice for mom, though, from what I can tell. That kind of playing out with it.
And of course, we shouldn't leave the mountain without talking about maybe a little bit of the physiology associated with bear hibernation itself. One thing that a lot of people are very curious about is, a bear's in a den. Does it go to the bathroom, for instance? What about what happens to their bodily functions overall when they're inside of the den?
Yeah, in many ways, some of that is suspended because, just the metabolic rate of the animal slows down immensely. I'm trying to think, even like as a heartbeat goes down to maybe 8 beats per minute, I think. So a lot of that slows down. I've not had the fun of crawling into a bear den like you have. I understand they're very clean places.
The one I saw, yeah, it smelled like earth. It did not smell like stinky bear. And we know bears are kind of smelly at this time of the year. Getting down into their belly holes down at Brooks River, they stink, but the den did not smell like that at all.
Once they go into hibernation, they won't urinate or den in their waste and reabsorbs it, which is a really amazing adaptation.
Yeah, they're turning poison into something that helps them to maintain muscle mass. They are able to recycle, calcium within their body too. So they come out of the den really they've lost a healthy bear has lost nothing but fat when it comes out of the den. Many of the very healthy bears still carry significant fat reserves with them throughout the springtime. Some of the really big bears, like 747 that shows up in June, it looks like he still has fat on his rump.
Yeah, a couple of the males I've never seen skinny. They may be skinnier than they are this time of year, but a bear in the prime of its life, when it shows up in late June, still seems pretty round.
And I think we've mentioned, in previous web chats, at least kind of, listening to you, Mike, that, a bear, they might be in hibernation, but they can come out of that. They might come out, kind of see what's going on outside the den. While that might be true, this is a huge process for their body to go through, to be able to hibernate, turn off those different functions. So I think this is something, it takes them a while to get into it, and it takes them a while to come out of that too. So I imagine, once they wake up, in springtime, there might be some days where they come out, see what's going on, and kind of that process, you mentioned maybe a week of going into the den, we're going to see kind of in reverse as they're coming out of it.
And I've read that a lot of biologists have described that period of time in the springtime when they're coming out of the den as walking hibernation. They may be active and they may be able to do things, but their metabolism still is very much shut down, and it seems like it takes them a couple of weeks really before their body functions start to wake up almost. Even in captive facilities, I've read about bears ignoring dog food that was set out in front of them, even though it had been hibernating for several months. So it takes a while for them to ramp up, so to speak, in the springtime. Hibernation, the physiology of that associated with bears is one of the most, I think, fascinating aspects of their lives overall. They spend really half their lives doing it, but we know probably less about that than other aspects of bear lives overall. So it's still a bit of a mystery. But it's an amazing adaptation that allows them to survive for sure. So we talk about how bears are survivors, and that hibernation physiology that they possess is one of the main reasons why they are such survivalists. We have a couple more questions. We'll try to answer these before the chat's over. This one may kind of harks back to adoption, but kind of doesn't in a way. I don't know if I've ever observed a bear leaving its cub in the care of another.
I've seen, they might tolerate some bears more, adult bears, so they'll let them be fairly close when they're out fishing, and a cub's on the bank or in a tree. I've never observed where it seemed like intentionally letting another bear take care of it, like that. And I don't know enough with the literature if that's been observed in family groups.
I have, the only thing that I've read that maybe is along those lines, it doesn't have to do with another bear, but oftentimes it's been described at McNeil River, where people are watching bears there, that certain females that are tolerant of the presence of people or habituated to the presence of people will bring their litters of cubs up near the viewing platform or the pad there, and they will park their cubs near the people, and then they'll go fish, because a lot of the really dominant males won't come near those habituated to the presence of people will bring their litters of cubs up near the viewing platform or the pad there, and they will park their cubs near the people, and then they'll go fish, because a lot of the really dominant males won't come near the group of people that's standing there next to the falls. We often see females with cubs. Almost always they approach Brooks Falls from the platform side of the river. I don't know, like 402, 409 over the past few years. Did we ever see her on the other side of the river, or those bears on the other side of the river?
I know of.
And that's where a lot of the big males happen to come down.
The only time I've seen a female with cubs near Brooks Falls was, I think, 2012, but she was about halfway between the falls and the riffles, and she wouldn't spend a lot of time there, so I don't think that quite counts.
Yeah.
But that is the one almost exception that I've seen to that. But otherwise, I think you're...
And I've heard that same thing, you know, other popular bear viewing areas. There's one in kind of southeast Alaska, Annan, you know, through the Forest Service. I've heard the same thing, you know, like mothers bringing the cubs up to the viewing platform area, and then going off, you know, fishing, same idea maybe, you know, the males aren't as likely to come up towards it. So, yeah, it's kind of amazing how our kind of interactions with wildlife, you know, what differences does our presence make, you know, on the river with their interactions?
Yeah, we emphasize, you know, staying on the wildlife viewing platforms, consolidating yourself in predictable places so the bears that are not habituated to us can work around us, and the bears that are tolerant of us maybe will, you know, just go about their business if we're in these predictable spots. But we are not a benign presence along the river, for sure. We are altering the bear's behavior in ways that maybe we can't predict. Maybe we shouldn't even try to predict. We should just kind of, you know, try to be as benign as possible, but and then let the bears, you know, go about their business. But we definitely alter the bear's behavior, whether we're standing in the river fishing or whether we're up on the wildlife viewing platform too. So yet another very interesting aspect of bear viewing along the Brooks River to consider. And when you're watching the cameras again are mounted on the wildlife viewing platforms themselves. So when you're seeing certain bears use the river in certain ways, that could be because there's people up on the wildlife viewing platforms too. Just something to look for as well, if you can try to tease out a little bit of that that data or that information, or that behavior, I should say. Last question here, since it's 3 o'clock. And I think all of us are eager to maybe get some blood flowing through our extremities again. Last question is, what was the highlight of the summer for each of you? And what are you looking forward to observing, learning, or confirming next summer?
Well, that's a great question.
That is a very tough question. There may be a slight pause while we think about that. Highlight of my summer. One thing that it doesn't have to do anything with bears, but was the Memorial Day weekend I was able to hike up on Mount Griggs and get most of the way to the summit. Weather was somewhat like this when I got close to the summit, so I decided to cut my losses and enjoy the experience that I had, climb back down. I was able to get up to a very large fumarole on Mount Griggs, which I thought was quite amazing. The fumarole itself, and if you're not familiar with that term, fumarole is a volcanic steam vent, essentially. This fumarole was probably about 2 feet in diameter, and I could hear it from a couple miles off. And that really was my main destination. I wanted to go see that fumarole, and if I got up to the higher slopes, then that would be just a bonus. So I was able to get to that fumarole, see some really intricate sulfur crystals growing in some of the other smaller fumaroles up on Mount Griggs. So that was really amazing. Going to the Valley of 10,000 Smokes it's just an amazing place overall. If you come to Brooks Camp, I think it's definitely worth seeing. I like to explore a different aspect of it. You know, every year I try to have a certain destination. There's also other places I like to visit too every year, like Nova Rupta, for instance, Katmai Pass area, the McGeek Lakes. Those are all worth seeing. each and every year. But there's a lot to see here in Katmai. So that was a highlight for me. Personally, also this is a highlight for me personally, but professionally too, the team effort to help divot, I think, and you were involved with that.
Yeah, I was, as you were talking, I was trying to think of mine, and for me it's really a tie, I think, between being able to help divot, because there are very few opportunities that you have in life where you get to see your direct efforts pay off that way. So that was a highlight for me. But I think just tied with it, I don't know how to pick, so I'm going to give two answers. Is just seeing 402's cub go from being, when it first showed up, a very sickly, scrawny bear that had, you know, just from a statistical perspective, almost no chance of surviving, and then, especially after it get abandoned, and to see it now where it's almost as big as Holly, and you can see it's well fed. You know, it looks like it has kind of that confidence and that a bear that age should have. So just being able to see it and know that it survived, and we don't know what will happen with it in the future, but you know, just the fact that it was able to go from where it was to where it is now, I think was really special. And that's not something you get to see ever. So I can't pick between those two.
Yeah.
I'll say both.
I was thinking about, you know, for me, and I don't know if this is definitely something that was the most probably memorable for me. I don't know if it's definitely the most enjoyable though. You know, there's something I'm sure everyone heard of, you know, on the community, that there was a very popular bear with bear viewers who died this year. This is bear 130 Tundra. This is the first bear that I ever saw in Katmai. This was, you know, I guess last summer. And I was one of the rangers who went out, you know, when she was found, you know, her carcass, you know, we moved it further off the trail. And it was an incredible experience for me because this was an animal that I connected with, you know, the first one I saw bear-wise. And this was an animal, you know, that lived a wild life. And then I was kind of there for the end of it too. And just how special is Katmai that, you know, these sorts of things happen. You know, I was able to be a part of that life on some level. So that's something I'll definitely take away from this year. Hopefully that's not too sobering of a thought, you know, kind of end out our talk with, though. This.
I think the bottom line is there were so many special things that happened this summer. I feel very fortunate to be a part of that again.
Yeah.
You know, you guys kind of reminded me of other things. I was thinking about, you know, Mount Griggs, but yeah, the divot expedition for sure. That was just so satisfying for the whole staff, not only the people who were, you know, involved with, you know, removing us there, but overall for all the rangers here, all the staff. I think so many of us felt that that we were just so fortunate to be involved in that. The story with Tundra again, just kind of an amazing part of the bear story overall. Bears lead hard lives. And that her death illustrated that for sure. And then Holly adopting the cub. That was, when 402's cub was abandoned, I thought, boy, we're going to see this cub just, you know, slowly just go downhill, because it did look so scrawny and sickly and caught maybe a fish here and there. Now it looks like a really energetic, healthy bear. To see something so rare like adoption in the bear world, I think I was really kind of flabbergasted.
I didn't think I was going to be able to see it.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
So next year, I think we're all looking forward to the continuation of that story, the continuation of, well, you know, all the other sort of drama associated with the bear world too, in the soap opera that you can see here along the Brooks River. So we're really thankful that everyone enjoys the bear cams so much. I think I checked on the computer here that about 1,100 people were watching us.
Oh wow!
Listening to us, and hopefully my speech isn't getting too slurred, but it's a little chilly, so we're going to start to do some jumping jacks once we get off camera here. But this will be our last live chat from Brooks River this year. We're probably gonna do some more throughout the winter time. Not that frequently, but we'll be doing some from King Salmon during the winter. So look for us to be online and answering questions in the comment stream on explore.org. But Yeah, an amazing season overall. Thanks to all the rangers here at Katmai, not only the ones at my sides here, but to all the staff that helps to make this place function and protect it. Thanks to all the bear cam watchers for being stewards of Katmai especially and wanting to learn more about this place. But we will we're gonna get our stuff packed up. We're gonna head down the mountain. We're gonna start to warm up, and I think tonight's definitely a night for maybe a few cups of hot chocolate for sure.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, not just one. So
Yeah, I hope when we come back next year, live from Brooks Camp, it'll be a little warmer.
exactly. So thanks for joining us today, everybody. And if we don't talk to you soon, enjoy your winter.
Take care.